Today's episode of She's All Fat is brought to you by 1 Second Every Day, a video diary app that helps you create, remember, and share your life story 1 second at a time.
As a wise fatty once said, pics or it didn't happen. And you know what's even better than a picture? A video diary. 1 second every day makes it so simple to capture little snippets of your daily life and stitch them together to tell a story.
We love 1 Second Every Day so much, we used it to capture our favorite summer memories as we prepared for season 3. Check it out now on our Instagram.
The app is free in the Google Play Store and $4.99 in the App Store. Start capturing memories today. Future you will thank current you. Thin people, you can send this to your other thin friends if you're trying to call them in on fat phobia and you want to educate them.
Absolutely. Please use this episode as a tool to figure this stuff out.
Calling body posse sisters, hush those diet culture whispers. We like your body big or small, rolls and ripples all for all. Sit on down, it's time to chat. She's all fat.
I'm Sophie,
I'm April, and this is She's All Fat.
the podcast for body positivity, radical self-love, and chill vibes only. This week, we'll discuss thin allyship, Mitski, and rooting for everybody black.
All right, so we're here. We're ready to talk about our obsessions for the first time in a few months.
Oh my God.
We're back. We've missed y'all.
Season 3.
Season 3, better. Wait, I was gonna try to make a phrase.
Season 2, Too Fat, Too Furious, and then
Perfect.
Season 3 will be what's the third sequel of anything?
I'm just gonna quickly Google.
It's always like Return.
Wait, Fast and Furious 3.
Return.
Oh, The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Okay, so The Fat and the Furious
LA Traffic.
LA Traffic. Perfect. The Fat and the Furious LA Traffic. Anyway, all that to say, this is the third part of the trilogy that is She's All Fat.
Yes.
Every bit as epic as all of those other trilogies
She's
and sequels.
All Fat and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which she watched.
Which I am the prisoner to everyone's Azkaban because I'm constantly inundated with Harry Potter references.
That's so true. You looking at your text is like a Dementor sucking out your soul out.
Truly.
Anytime.
All right.
April.
Yes.
What are you obsessed with this week?
Oh my goodness. So much. I really have been saving up all my obsessions just for you, my sweet, sweet listeners. But the two at the top of the list were number 1. As you all know, I am a pop princess. The ultimate pop princess, I guess, of 2018. Am I giving that to her? Well, one of the most notable pop princesses of 2018, Ariana Grande, finally released her album that she's been threatening to release all year called Sweetener. It's quite polarizing.
What do you think?
I wanted to do a quick rundown of the album. I have really enjoyed watching all of Ariana Grande's interviews about Sweetener because I just think it's funny to listen to the way musicians talk about their music. And she is always just like, I'm always just trying to cover vibes, and I feel like the vibe of this album is just like more love, and like I want everybody to have a hug, like feeling like Ariana Grande is hugging you through this album, and like the vibe is
that
a
what
hug.
She said?
Swear to God, this is all verbatim. But then you listen to the album and you're like, oh, I do feel a love vibe. Okay, so here's the rundown. The first song, Raindrops, is just like this little ballad she's singing. Our queen is extra, and I'll give her that. I don't love that, but clearly that one was for her more than anybody else. The next is Blazed. People are saying on Twitter that they don't like the Pharrell Williams songs on this album. I don't mind them, but I don't think there's anything special about a Pharrell Williams song in 2018. The Light is Coming. We don't talk about that. Because it's one of my triggers, but I appreciate her for trying. Next is Rem. True stands know that Rem was originally a Beyonce song. So you can listen to the full Beyonce Wake Up version. I will link it in the show notes. Unfortunately, I do think it's better. But I appreciate what Ariana Grande is trying to do. It's like a cool, sleepy, sexy song. Okay. So I'm into it. God is a Woman is a banger. Sweetener is very bad. It's the title song. And it's very bad. Maria, please put a clip of her being like, mix it, mix it, mix it. Like, no one knows what she's talking about. The next 2 songs, Successful and Every Time, are very average. Breathing is the song that's going to get her a Grammy this year.
Whoa. She
said she wrote it in the midst of an anxiety attack, and it's just about that, like, raw feeling or whatever. And I'm like, okay, girl, like, anxiety is very on trend. Like, shout out to Shawn Mendes. But then you listen to the song. Like, all the pop stars are like, actually? Like, all right. But you listen to the song, and it really is just, like, so raw, and she's doing a lot of cool things vocally, and it's a standout. Like, I really do think that's going to be big for her. Next is No Tears Left to Cry. We don't talk about that song. Borderline and Better Off are, like, fine. Like, she said in interviews that she's kind of, like, not embarrassed, but over the old pop stuff. She's like, I'm not going to do another Problem song. She's like, quote, I'm over vocal gymnastics. She's like, I'm just here to sing. Like, I don't have anything to prove.
I like that song, though.
I like that song, too, but basically she's saying, she's like, I don't want to go, like, be straining myself on stage anymore. I just want to, like, luxuriate.
Sure. She doesn't want to get any more no's.
Yeah, clearly that's what went down.
She sees what's happened to Mariah, and she's like, there, but for the grace of God.
And honestly, it's smart because Mariah Carey had that realization like 30 years too late.
Yeah,
it's
so
bad.
true.
So I feel you. But to me, the standout on the album is Pete Davidson.
That's my favorite song.
I think that's the best song.
It's so good. I wish it were so much longer.
Exactly. It's so good. It's just like, I just believe
vibes.
It literally is vibes. It's like love vibes. Like, she's going to be happy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for her and her little, like, you know, compulsive relationship. Like, I want her to be, it's like very impulsive. It's very like literally just feeling the vibes and going for it. And I feel it in the music.
They both like had long-term relationships, and then we're like, this came up out of nowhere, and everyone's like, wait, but didn't you have a girlfriend a second ago?
We'll see how long it lasts, but they're in that cute phase at the beginning where she's like, literally, I will die for Pete Davidson tomorrow, which nobody ever thought anyone would say. So this is amazing. So that's Sweetener. Like, I'm definitely into it. I was surprised by a lot of it, but all I want from my pop queens is to serve up, like, risk taking, and she gave that to me.
Yeah.
So shout out to Ariana. My next just little obsession is I watched the show Black Lightning this summer. It's on Netflix. So it's this like black man lives in this town that's supposed to be Ferguson, I think. And so he like is the principal of a all black private school and like very involved in the community. But at night he's Black Lightning, and he has superpowers because his whole body is like charged with electricity basically. For years he didn't want to use his powers because he thought it was doing more harm than good. But then like the town is being torn apart by crime, so then he like starts being Black Lightning again, and then all this stuff starts to happen, and it's cool because it's like political, but it's not ham-fisted. Like, it sounds like it could be really ham-fisted, but it's actually like it's a superhero show that just happens to be political, and it's really fun, and the cast is mostly black, and they're all beautiful, and it's like funny too.
That's amazing.
Every episode, like, edge of my seat. There were some problematic things. Honestly, if you watch the show, like, at me, because there's a couple of things that I do want to talk about Black Lightning, but overall, like, I really loved the show. It was a really riveting, like, binge watch, and it's coming back soon for season 2, and I'm like, I'm gonna be there. Those were my biggest, like, summer obsessions. What about you? What are your obsessions?
So I just thought I would do a quick rundown of, like, the media I'm taking in right now.
Okay.
On Twitter, it's the drama between Azalea Banks, Elon Musk, Grimes. Don't know what's going on.
She was at the house way longer than I thought she was, by the way.
I'm worried someone's going to die out of this.
Because she did say the Russians are after Elon. What's going on?
I do not know.
But
It's a twist I never expected. I just feel like since, like, the 2010s are an era where, like, celebrity pairings are just all over the place that I never thought of, and that I never thought would affect things outside of just media. Do you know what I mean?
Now the world powers are involved.
It's just it's like you get a huge Instagram following and you're the Pope all of a sudden.
Literally.
It's like, I don't understand what's going on. But that was very interesting and wild to me. Okay, number 2. I read Sharp Objects. I did not like the book.
You didn't like it at all? At first you kind of liked it.
I liked it fine. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. I don't know if it's Gillian or Jillian. I don't think she's a good writer, Gillian Flynn. I think she has great plots, but, like, Gone Girl is a good movie. Didn't like the book. I know a lot of people love it. I am loving the HBO show, which has its finale tonight, which will have been, last week.
Okay.
When people are listening to this. I thought that the show it's doing some really interesting things with the way it's, like, incorporating the character's history and stuff. And I think that's done in a much more interesting visual way than happens in the book. The other main thing about this book is the reason I stopped reading Gone Girl halfway through. And then also at the end of the Sharp Objects book, there's a preview of, like, her next book. There's just, like, so much fat phobia throughout the whole thing. Like, there's just so many. I tweeted about this a while ago with some excerpts where it's just like the main character who's a narrator is flawed, right? And that's the true in all of them. It's like unreliable narrator, blah, blah, blah. But she's just so hateful of fat people. And it's like, when that's true across every single book you've written, that's just, like, if someone was racist as the main character across every book, you'd be like, this author is just racist.
Yeah, exactly. Because you are just writing versions of yourself, like everybody is.
So it's stuff like, this guy was flirting with the girl behind the counter. She's fat. Like, her face is as big as the pies she's selling.
Are you
or something.
kidding me?
Like, it's just
That's
ridiculous.
not even a good, oh my God.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not, I don't think it's great writing. No. And it's also, she's just so fatphobic. So, yeah, I tweeted about it if anyone cares to go, like, search out those excerpts.
Is that into the show? Like, that feeling?
Not so much. I mean, that's what I think they do. I think they do a better job in this show. Like, it's harder for TV shows to have a first-person narrator. You know what I mean? Like, there's no voiceover. And so it's like, you're pulled back as an observer. We are somewhat in our head. We're seeing flashbacks of the main character's thoughts. But it's like, all the fatphobic stuff is in, like, narration in our head in the book. And so there's not really as much. There's, like... I think there's a couple things in the world that are, like, kind of generic, whatever, but it's not the same. Like, you just see her being, you're like, oh, she's kind of messed up. Okay. Without it having to be, like, throwing people under the bus.
Perfect.
So that's what I'm reading. I'm also, the book I am enjoying, I'm reading this book that's not even a real book. It's just by, you know, my old childhood fantasy fave, Tamara Pierce. She has, like, a book out from a while ago that's called, like, The Spy Lord's Guide to Tortle or something. Whoa. And it's just like maps and letters from various characters in different books she like put together. Okay. It kind of feels like if you watched a Wes Anderson movie and then like bought the coffee table book.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The highlights.
But I'm enjoying.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to listen to the new Mitski album. You asked me who Mitski was the other day.
I don't know who she is.
All my white friends know who Mitski is, and all my part white friends know who Mitski
I feel like I'm literally missing out, because I found out because Demi Dijuibe, who's a black person, was tweeting about it, and I was like, oh, officially everybody knows but me. And it's like, she's had other albums. How have I missed this?
Well, from what I've heard so far, it's like if Lana Del Rey was like indie and like kind of thoughtful.
Okay, maybe I will. I like Lana.
It is very, very emo. Okay. Like the song I listened to that Lindsay sent me to listen to, it literally starts, the first lyric is, my God, I'm so lonely.
Jesus. Okay, maybe not in this political climate, but I'll circle back.
But it's pretty. Good. It's very pretty. It's just kind of sad. And then I'm also listening to Meaty by Samantha Irby on Audible, and she also narrates it, and I'm a big fan of hers.
We love her.
We love her. And that's my obsessions, I think, for this week.
Amazing. Let's move on to our shout-outs.
Thank you so much to our listeners who reviewed us on Apple Podcasts. One day, we will be featured in New and Noteworthy, probably when we're 6 seasons in.
Think about it. It's season 3.
We're still new. There's podcasts on there that have been on there, and they're, like, in season 10. So, like, whatever. Thank you so much to those of you who reviewed us on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate all of you so much. Shout out to @Savage, I guess not @, just their usernames.
Yeah, just their name.
To the following people attached to these usernames. Savage Garden Beauty, Soccer 952310, Flabby Godmother, Musk 8, Anna Berry Blogging, and Mealtony.
Iconic.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
We love you. And we seriously do go back and read those reviews. Sometimes when I'm sad and sitting on the toilet, I will read a review saying how much they love us.
It's so nice.
So thank you so much. Next, we're going to shout out our lovely patrons. These are people who have become a Patreon at patreon.com/she'soffatpod. Shouting out Jenny Swinson, Caitlin and Morin, Emily Langowitz, Haley Doyle, Madison Holtz, and Sophie Scar Newman. Thank you all so much for supporting us. You're the wind beneath my wings.
Yay.
Thank you. Before we get into our tip jar corner, we wanted to do a call for voice memos about our upcoming episode all about people who are super fat. So one of our goals for the season is to talk about different identities and intersections that we don't personally experience. And one of those is super fat, meaning, of course, there's not a direct definition of it, but pretty much people who live in a body that is one of the most marginalized fat bodies and has issues with accessibility, access to clothing, and feels that their body is very fat for the current world that we're living in. So if you feel like that's you and you want your voice included in that episode, send us a voice memo that's 2 minutes or less to FYI@she'sallfatpod.com, and we might include you in the show.
Give April that voice.
I want that voice. All right, let's move on to our tip jar corner.
If you're a new listener, in our Tip Jar Corner, we talk about things that listeners have told us about that we want to share with the rest of you. So that could be in an email that was sent in an Instagram comment, in a Facebook comment.
Okay, so this listener emailed us this little tip. On the 2017 Netflix show The Worst Witch, the main character's best friend is head girl of her year. Kind, generous, lovable, and chubby, with no one making nasty comments so far. Midway into the second episode, so hopefully that continued to be I hope that holds up. But this listener thinks this is good fat representation, which we always want to see. We talk about a lot of the horrible examples we see, but also I hope that we're going to get more of these good, not humiliating examples.
Yeah.
So thank you for sending this in.
Check that out. You know, I love my magic books.
Hell yeah.
Okay, also, we want to shout out our Facebook group, which you can be a part of if you're a Patreon at Team Paisley Moo and above. This week, people are talking about the best acids to use for skincare, crop top triumphs, and tips for dealing with insomnia. Also, we just wanted to say quickly about our Patreon. We restructured over the summer. That's one of the things we did. Now, there's slightly different rewards for every level. So if you have not considered before, or if you're interested in checking it out now, go to patreon.com/she'salfatpod. Team I Love Bread every week, starting next week, is going to be getting a little extra audio segment. So if you're a Patreon at any level, you usually get bloopers and audio extras every week. But we're going to be recording an extra planned special segment for that level. So if that interests you, go sign up. And also, if you're at that level right now, look in your inbox this week for a poll about the topics you'd like us to discuss or some suggestions for what you'd like us to do, because that is a special reward just for you.
Just for you. And if you want that sweet, sweet content, you know what to do.
All right. We should really get to the meat of it, don't you think?
Yeah, let's do it. The meat of it. We're in the very first meat of it of season 3, and we're dedicating this week's The Meat of It to our thin friends and allies all over the world. This one is for y'all. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about why we wanted to do this episode. When we started our season 3 brain dump, this was the first one that we were like,
yeah,
this is
we
gonna
gotta do this.
We gotta open.
So we had an episode season 1 about being a fat friend, and a lot of people like that episode. It's one of our highest shared episodes. I think people are using it as a way to send to their friends to be like, this is what it's like for me. And so one of the things we thought is we get a lot of questions about being a thin friend to people who are fat or plus size people. And so this is going to be the corollary to that. So if that one was what it's like to be the fat friend, this is one is what it's like to have well-meaning thin friends / thin people. You can send this to your other thin friends if they're if you're trying to call them in on fat phobia and you want to educate them.
Absolutely. Please use this episode as a tool to figure this stuff out, because we know allyship is hard. We obviously have marginalized identities, and we also have privileged identities. And so I get it, but also we got some stuff to talk about.
We get a lot of emails asking us about how to be a better thin ally. And we say all the time, this show's for this is a family, we're for fat people, but it's kind of like any of our other favorite media that's something directed towards a specific audience that people outside of the audience will also love. It's really cool that a lot of people email us asking us for tips on how to be better allies. I understand why, because a lot of times we're not talking to you, thin people.
Yes.
We're talking about what it's like to be fat, and we're talking to other fat people, and it's kind of aimed in a way that's you know what we're talking about, right? Here's our experience, blah. But it is totally valid for thin people to be great, okay, I hear you. What do I do?
Yeah, exactly. No? Of course. That is the next step. And by the way, if that is your next thought, you're doing it right. But, just a couple things we wanted to go over.
Yeah. So while we are super happy that people have these questions, there are a couple things we would love if people didn't do anymore. We set up some boundaries, and these boundaries are just for us, but they're also maybe, if you're thin, good ones to remember for your other fat friends. They probably would appreciate respecting these boundaries as well. Yes. I would say. I think this is maybe more like a public figure kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I especially get a lot of Instagram DMs about traumatic things that happen in the world about fat people. Like, I get a lot of DMs that are like, look at this terrible show about how fat people are, like, and how they're unhealthy. Look at this terrible tweet from someone. Here's this experience I had where someone said something really awful about fat people. Isn't that bad? And it's kind of, usually the tone is either, number one, I need you to see this and commiserate with me about how awful it is. I need you to feel bad about it as well as as much as I do. Or number two, are you going to talk about this? Aren't you going to fix this? Aren't you going to say something and speak on this because it's your speaker position or something?
Like, almost if people feel like they're tagging in their, like, superhero to come, like, save the day. And so I will say, like, I don't get a lot of these DMs. We've talked about this before, and I almost feel like either people are scared of me or they don't anticipate that I will respond. But since so Sophie runs the show Instagram, I run the show Twitter, and I do get a couple of these DMs in our Twitter as well, where it's kind of like, you know, here is a horrible thing that, like, maybe another podcaster said. Do you plan on responding? What are you going to do about this? Like, when the whole Insatiable mess happened, it's a lot of @She's All Fat Pod wondering what your plan is to stop this. And so just want to totally clarify that, I mean, here's the thing. We're big fans of podcasts and we consume a lot of pop culture. And I get that feeling of, I know that someone talks about the same subject matter, so maybe they'll have something to say. But also, please understand that we make this podcast from our personal experiences. Like, we try not to make it seem as if we're, like, the authorities on fat phobia and body positivity, but more like...
We're not fat phobia watchdog.
No, not at all. Like, more like we just make the show to talk about our own experiences and have a place for other people to talk about their experiences, but also, like, we're still affected by that.
Like, I'm more forgiving of it from other fat people who are, like, looking for someone to reach out to. It's still inappropriate to do that to my personal Instagram if I don't know you.
Like, please don't do that.
Don't do that. But, like, if it's a thin person, then I'm like, I wish you would think this through a little more. Yeah. What do you think my reaction is going to be? I'm a person. Exactly. I'm going to be sad when I see this. Why do you need me to be sad for you to, like, feel valid and you're not liking it?
And also, like, trust me, we see enough of that.
I know that it exists.
We know. Like, we've personally experienced it, like, constantly for years.
And if you don't have another person who understands talking about, like, fat positivity to send it to, then you need to cultivate that in your own life. Like, I understand seeing something bad and feeling sad about it and wanting validation and to talk about it, but we're not that for you, like, on Instagram.
No, not at all.
At all.
Not at all. I don't want our listeners to think that the first and last step of being an ally is listening to this podcast. Like, that's definitely not it. Thank you for listening, and you are taking a step and changing the way you think by listening, but the work is not listening to the podcast. Like, that's not the end of the sentence. And we can't do the work for you.
Are a thin person and you see something fatphobic and you really want to share it with someone, think about sharing it with another thin person so the two of you can process through it together, and think about, like, how you can talk about it and be like, oh, I don't like this. What about it don't I like? Here's the things that are butting up against the stuff that I'm learning. Doing that is something that is like an exercise that helps you sharpen your mental acuity around being able to talk about and argue through topics. And it's important to do that with people who are also learning. Like, don't, put that on someone else fat to do it with you, unless someone has explicitly said to you, I'll do that. It's the same with, like, honestly, it's like that's the practice I try to do with getting myself out of all the racism I've learned through being white. It's like, talk to other white people about things when I realize them or when I notice them. I'm like, wow, this is fucked up. I don't, like, see racist shit and send it to April. That'd be fucked up.
That'd be
what
horrible.
would be the point of that? She would feel bad. Why would I do that to her?
Because if the desired reaction is, can you believe this? Every fat person you know, including the hosts of She's All Fat, believe it. We fully know. That's why we made a podcast. So now that you know what not to do, we want to give a couple of tips on what to do before we hand over the reins to some thin allies of our own.
Yeah. So here's some top 3 easy tips for if you're a thin ally and you're like, wait, well, what should I do? Number 1, speak up.
Sophie and I talk all the time about how whenever some, like, fat phobic shit is going down, the people who we seem to be talking about it are, like, fat Instagrammers, fat models, us, our, like, friends who are thin allies, or just people who already make a whole living and career out of talking about this stuff. Yeah. And it would be so exciting, and it would also help visibility if more thin people were to literally use their voices and get involved in these conversations. So if your instinct is to tag She's All Fat and say, can you believe this? Instead, why don't you comment in the comment section of whatever you saw that was horrible and use your voice instead.
And if you're struggling, like, I've had a couple people say, like, oh, I just thought I was supposed to, like, amplify fat voices, which is always a good instinct, and you can do that as well. But, like, for example, here's a template you could use. You see something, you see something, you say something. No.
Rules at the airport and rules here.
Yeah, if you see something weird, like for example, it's on Twitter, there's like an article headline, it's messed up. You want to talk about it. Your first instinct is to add us about it. You quash that instinct. Mm-hmm. You quote tweet it and you say, hey, like this is messed up because X, Y, and Z. I support my fat friends. And then if you want to, in the reply to it, or even in the original one, because this is a totally different thing than what we're talking about before, you could say, if you want to learn more about fat phobia, listen to @She's All Fat Pod.
Exactly. That's the most effective, because otherwise it really does just come across as, please do this work for me. When I just think, honestly, we all know the more privileged you are, the more likely you are to be heard. So you have to use your place to get the work done.
It's also like if you just retweet fat voices, then you have to realize that you're putting fat voices at the forefront of receiving abuse.
Yep.
You're much less likely as a thin person to get people being really rude to you about fat like stuff on Twitter. If you make your own tweet, then we are if you just retweet us. So just think about that before you just retweet.
Number 2 is a tip we've talked about, of course, earlier in this podcast, which is don't just stop listening to the podcast. Like I want to acknowledge that I'm sure if you're a thin person who's been perpetuating diet culture your whole life, listening to this podcast might be like a little bit painful. So it's not like nothing. Like it's not like an effort that I think should be taken lightly. Like I know that it does take effort to listen to a podcast where like we might call you out on some real shit.
Yeah.
So definitely it is a great first step to listen here, but also the next step should be following some of the tips that you will hear later in the episode from the people that we've talked to. Yeah, I think listening is day 1. And
yes.
what happens on day 2, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly. And finally, tip number 3 is, like any other form of allyship, you should try to strengthen your skills amongst yourselves. Meaning, we can try to give you tips from our perspective, but ultimately, it's hard for us to relate to a thin ally in this specific way because I've never been thin. I've only experienced fat phobia and I've only lived in a fat body. So I think allyship is most effective when it's done amongst people who are privileged. Like I think it's really cool to see white people try to figure out how to deal with racism from other white people with other white people.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of tips for how white people can combat racism when they're talking to other white people because I'm not white. And so I think the same thing goes here. I want to see allies figure out allyship amongst themselves without me. So that's the only way, because otherwise the alternative is demanding emotional labor from your friends who are already tired of shit. So
yeah, exactly.
this is the alternative. Exactly. I believe in you.
Exactly. We have a couple audio clips from our thin friends interspersed throughout this episode, our close, good, special friends. And we also did an amazing interview. So we have a Chew the Fat about to come up for you with MD Spicer-Sitzes, who is the Associate Director for the Body Positive and Director of Operations for Building Allies. They are an activist, an organizer, and a really, really generous educator. We learned so much from this conversation with them. They were so anxious to help.
Yes, they've been emailing us pretty much since the beginning of the podcast saying, like, please let me on, please let me share.
Let me help.
Which is honestly rare. We get a lot of emails asking us for things.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that we get an email from someone who is so excited to help our listeners learn more. And so thank you so much to MD for being with us. You the best.
Yeah, you're the best. And here is some of that interview in our segment called Chew the Fat. Chew the Fat. MD, can you tell us a little bit about your role in the Body Positive and how you see the Body Positive functioning in the Body Positive or Fat Positive community?
Yeah, I'm the Associate Director of the organization. So what that means is that I support a lot of the internal logistics and inner workings of the organizations. I help do logistics for all of our workshops. I do the logistics for all of our live trainings, our facilitator trainings, and also handle a lot of our communications for our online courses. I also manage the volunteer and internship programs here, so I get to work with a lot of fun folks that are, starting their journey or on their journey in this movement. And I actually also just created my first workshop, and that is going to be a workshop called Queer Bodies. It's a continuing education optional workshop. So it's for professionals and community members that are working specifically with LGBTQIA plus folks. And I've adapted the body positive model and core competencies to really fit my community there. So I'm really excited about that. And that's going to be on October 20th here in Berkeley. And there's more information about that on the website.
That's amazing.
That sounds very cool. And we will link to that in the show notes so our listeners can check that out. So it sounds like you are the perfect person to talk to about our episode, which is going to be all about talking to straight-sized allies, just because we found out that a lot of our listeners are straight-sized. And also we have found that either we get DMs of people doing fat-phobic things and sending it to us and being like, what are you going to do about this? Or just like desperate pleas for like, how can I help? So I'm wondering, what is your advice for those people who are doing both of those things? How can they jump in?
Practicing allyship is really important. I have a thought about that. I think that allyship can be or has become in a lot of circles a very passive sort of turn it on or off type thing. And I volunteer with another wonderful organization, Building Allies, and we do work mostly with trans and gender nonconforming communities. And we operate under a model called active allyship, and that's really sort of turning on the light of allyship to be able to resource yourself in just about any moment. I think that, you know, we call ourselves allies, and then sort of when it isn't so convenient, we just opt to take that hat off. And so one piece of advice I might give to folks who are starting their journey to becoming an ally is really thinking about how to activate that and bring that into your daily life. And so, for example, like, continue to resource yourself. If you're listening to this podcast, then that's great. You're making a good move. But like, you know, you can't expect your fat friends, your colleagues, your family members to constantly be educating you. That's just a lot of emotional labor. And if you can imagine that happening every day, almost everywhere you go, it layers up, and it can be very exhausting and emotionally, physically, mentally. We live in a time of Google, YouTube, Instagram, all of these places where we can find fantastic resources and education to really get us, you know, equipped to handle moments, whether or not our fat friends are in the room. And, you know, so that might look like, you know, diversifying your view of beauty, you know, like checking what shows you watch, what famous people you follow or consider beautiful on Instagram, and questioning why you think they're beautiful. We think that by, you know, listening, you know, to a podcast, which is one wonderful way, we think that that can make us an ally, but taking action is just, I think, moving into that way of life a little bit further. And that's how we create social change on like a better, bigger scale.
One of the like things that I try to work on with that is like, I understand the temptation to ask us things, because like when I think about my work as like a white ally to people of color, it's often like a first instinct, if you feel uncertain about something, to be like, am I doing this right? Like, is this what you want me to do? And then I can reflect and be like, well, I know in the spaces where I marginalize, what I just want is for like thin people to talk to other thin people and be working on it. And so that has like made it easier for me in like the ways that I'm privileged for me to like work in those spaces is like, okay, white people need to be talking to white people about racism. Like we need to be talking to each other about figuring it out and like reading books and such. But I haven't found a great way to suggest that kindly to thin people.
Because I think like what you're saying is exactly true, that the biggest thing is what are our like quote unquote thin allies doing when we're not in the room?
Yeah.
Like whenever something fat phobic happens and it hits social media, how come I only see other fat people with platforms talking about it?
Yeah.
Like I think it would be really helpful for our listeners to hear, number one, what are some good, like whether it's books or like organizations that they can support and benefit from as far as just like on an information level. And then second, how can they engage? Like I know some of our listeners are openly like, I have extra money. What can I throw my money at that would help the cause? People who don't have extra money, what can they do on a day-to-day basis that would help us all in the long run?
One piece of information that I was very unaware of was information about the BMI chart. And so I think that that's like, a great, basic place to start is learning the history of the BMI chart, which tends to dominate our entire messed up healthcare system. The BMI chart was created by this Belgian astronomer. His named like Adolphe Kerele, I believe.
Yeah.
He was an astronomer and a mathematician. He definitely was not a doctor. He was not a physician. The equation that he created has been debunked over and over again throughout time, but somehow this formula was adopted in the United States by insurance companies in the 40s to basically fat shame people and really create a false narrative around size and to really perpetuate sizeism. And so
it was originally created to measure population size as a whole. It wasn't created to measure individuals. It was supposed to be a way to measure, make an average number of people's weights with height factored in. But that it's for groups of people. It's not for... even originally, it was being taken out of context, which is so dumb.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
It was supposed to be a average tool.
Not I'm 15
individual.
and I'm now fat
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
It's understanding histories like that, I think, are really, really important if we want to start to combat body shame and stigma and sizeism. To shift that, learning about models that are much more updated and thorough, much more centered actually around the body experience, such as Health at Every Size. Check it out. You can easily look up Health at Every Size or HAES for short and learn more about, the variances in people's size, people's ancestries, the various things that impact people's bodies. And it's a wonderful resource to start with. There's also a book called Intuitive Eating by Elise Resch and Evelyn Tribble. It's awesome. They have sort of this 10-step guide. Not all of the steps might be great for everybody, but I think overall it's really wonderful. Connie Subcheck, our executive director, co-founder, and my lovely dear friend, wrote a wonderful book called Embody. And that, before I started working with the Body Positive, that was my intro to the movement. It has some amazing information about our model. It has wonderful stories from leaders of experience, and it has things like worksheets and things that you can actually do if you are a parent and you want to work with your kid, or if you're a teacher or something like that, want to bring something into the classroom. We also do facilitator training. So we've researched a model for over 20 years. Elizabeth Scott, our co-founder, is also an LCSW and works with clients who have struggled with eating disorders and body image disturbances. And, for years, her and Connie went into classrooms, went into community settings, and just asked people what they need. And I think our model is not only very thorough, but one of my favorite things about it is that it's just so freaking adaptable.
So as someone who is straight sized but has had experience with disordered eating or thinking in the past, if you're in a situation where somebody, if it's all straight size or thin people, and somebody says something or does something fat phobic or makes a joke or something like that, as someone who has all of this training and experience, what would be your response, or what are the first things you reach for to kind of assess the situation? A lot of my straight size friends have told me, they'll be like, oh my God, I had this opportunity and I just couldn't think quickly enough, what would be the best way to approach this? They don't want to seem attacking, but they also don't want to say nothing. How have you dealt with that? And what are your approaches for those situations?
Yeah, I think, we have to maybe question ourselves a little bit on what attacking is, or what seeming attacking or seeming defensive is, and actually just practicing active allyship. If I'm in a situation where, for example, a friend of mine is going, oh, did you see so-and-so? They've gained some weight. I start by asking them questions. One way to not come off as seeming like you're attacking a situation is to, sort of gently introduce a question how is that any of your, your concern? And, I think okay, it's your concern because you're concerned about, let's say something really common, which is like, oh, I'm concerned about a person's health. We know repetitively that health and size, correlation and causation are not the same thing. That size does not determine our health. And so I sort of start with a question and then follow up with a fact. And the fact, comes from me resourcing myself. As a thin ally, I think there are ways to bring this into conversation and be informative and not feel like you're attacking someone or you don't have a place to it. I mean, allyship isn't perfect. It's like we don't always know what to do. But I mean, I err on the side of saying something.
But do you feel from your side of things, do you feel like things have improved or like do you see like change happening? Give us some like a hopeful perspective.
What's the prognosis? Where are we?
Yeah, where are we?
I do. I feel so hopeful. And I think part of it is because I am immersed in the work. So I see not only this amazing reach, but I think especially with the, visibility that's on social media platforms, and just in general, I do think that there is a lot of change occurring. I mean, I think when Connie and Elizabeth started the Body Positive over 2 decades ago, they were among the first to use the words be body positive. And so now it's sort of grown into this full-fledged, like visible movement. And I think that gives people a great sense of connection, no matter where they are in the world. And I do see a lot of change. I see practitioners and clinicians trying to change.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add or that you want to make sure people know?
Or you want to shout out? Please shamelessly plug. You've earned it. You've earned it.
I do want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to the Body Positive. We have these wonderful online courses that if you aren't ready to go to a training and become a trained facilitator, but you just want to resource yourself a little bit, there are 2 tracks for the courses. We have a general track, which is like for educators, parents, activists. A lot of this work is wonderful, and it's also very geared towards women-identified folks. And so I just want to express that it is for everybody. We offer group discounts. It's also accessible. We have closed captions, worksheets, audio. We have a training coming up in Boston in November, a 2-day facilitator training. And then we have a training coming up in San Diego in February of 2019. And right now, if you register for that, you'll get an early bird discount of $150 off the training, which is major. And we do payment plans. Like I said, we have scholarships. We try everything we can to make it accessible to folks, and very, very excited to just get this movement spread and also to give people usable tools and resources that they can implement into their daily lives, which I think is really, really important.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing. And like we said, all of the helpful resources you've mentioned will be linked in the show notes.
But yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a long time in the making. So we're so glad we got to finally chat with you and get all of your good resources and wisdom and your lovely voice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So juicy. Thanks for taking time to hang out with me today.
Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay. You may know me as #SorryLindsay. I'm Sophie's best friend since freshman year of college, and I'm a thin ally. Watching Sophie embrace body positivity and learn about it over the past several years has, for me, taught me so much about the ways that I've been conditioned to think and act and talk about my body and other people's bodies. Above all, I guess it's about learning to notice and question things that I never would have thought about really before, which I'm ashamed to admit. Things like, going into a store, would I just look for my size? And now I notice if there aren't sizes bigger than that, or, going places and things aren't accessible for my fatter friends, or listening to people talk about wanting to go on diets, things like that. So overall, I guess it's made me a more thoughtful friend, a more thoughtful consumer, just generally a more thoughtful human being. And I'm not perfect, obviously, but I'm certainly more aware now, and that's really important.
Hi guys, this is Nina. I'm calling because I am a skinny bitch, and I've got something to say. I've learned so much from you two, Sophie and April, just from listening to this podcast and the two of you talk about your experiences in the world. I am loath to say I was unaware before, but your thoughts have educated me to the point where I'm now able to articulate my blind spots in my allyship with fat acceptance, namely my internalized anti-fatness. Acknowledging that I have that doesn't erase my allyship, it just keeps me aware that I have my blind spots, Speaking out is paramount as a thin ally. I'm not here to listen to your fat jokes. This, I guess, is just a general message for the world. It's 2018, the world might be ending, but not before your lazy-ass comedy. But anyway, that's it. I have a lot of thoughts, but mainly I'm so proud of you guys, and this pod is my personal claim to fame. Anyway, what's my hashtag? I'm waiting. Bye.
And now, a small clip from Maria's Corner.
Hey everyone, here's some advice on how to be a thin ally and kind of jumping into action after learning and becoming part of the body positive community. So I'm straight-sized, I'm probably considered thin, and just as I've worked to separate any weird feelings and associations from the word fat, same goes for the word thin or skinny or straight-sized. It's not a status, it's not a prize, it's not really a measure of anything, just the same as the word fat. It's just a descriptor. My second piece of advice would be to just listen. And I know a lot of you are already doing that by listening to this podcast. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest reasons I was drawn to SAF was because at the point that Sophie and April hired me, I had known about body positivity for maybe a little bit less than a year, but I had really started to get into it right around that point. I told them that I wanted to just really keep learning, and what better way to listen to people talk about body positivity than by editing their show. And just so everyone's aware, I cringe at some of the things I said in my interview, but I also recognize that I've come very far and simultaneously have a very long way to go. So, listen and keep learning and never stop learning. Number 3 would be to stop seeking approval. Just do the work. Call people out on their fat phobia. I've had a couple of thin friends just call themselves fat in front of me because no fat people were around and they felt that that was something normal to do. Now, they would have probably never said that in front of a fat person, but they felt okay saying it in front of me. Why? Because they have all this internalized fat phobia. So I call them out, give them a brief. You're not fat. Not that there's anything wrong with fat. You are allowed to feel uncomfortable in your body. You are allowed to want to get different sizes of clothing. That's all valid, but you're not fat, and don't use that as a negative descriptor because being skinny does not make you better. And a lot of the time they have questions, and that's when you can kind of delve into it, or what happens more often than not is that they get defensive, but the more you do it, the better you are at getting to those points quickly and effectively. Next on my list is just to be upfront about when you slip up or when you say something stupid or when you have a learning moment. You're gonna make mistakes, we all do, so don't get defensive about it. And last but not least, just do not traumatize your fat friends with horrible stories. Sophie and April have already spoken about this, so I don't need to go on about it for too long, but I know as a person of color, that is extremely traumatizing when people are sending me stuff about, kids being separated from their parents and, shitty immigration stuff that's going on in this country. In that same way, just don't send your fat friends traumatizing shit. That about wraps it up for my little pointers. And now I'm gonna leave it to Sophie and April to wrap up this section.
What makes you feel, what's some example that's made you feel really good that a thin friend or ally has done?
I think the thing we talked about in the Fat Friend episode, which is just like being a witness, like if I am sharing something that happened to me that is because of my marginalized body and my thin friend is listening and taking that in and can comment that that's not fair that happened to me and that's fucked up. Like that's the biggest thing. Because to me, the most irritating response is like, really? But if my friend is just like, that's horrible. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
That makes me feel a lot better. Because otherwise
too.
you just feel like, did you hallucinate that? Did that really happen? That's so bad. I think then that is so simple. Like that is a version of allyship. And that's like the easiest thing is just being a witness to your fat friends and supporting them. So that is really important to me. What about you?
Yeah, I think one thing is like believing me. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast, but there's like a certain thing that happens sometimes if you're a fat woman and like a guy will kind of hit on you that has a flavor to it of like, you're fat, so you should appreciate this. And it's not like they're going to explicitly say that unless it's someone who you reject them and then afterwards they're like, you're fat anyways. And you're like, well, you were hitting on me. So, but like that's kind of hard to describe because it's just like a weird vibe thing that's happened to you. And so I've appreciated it when that's happened to me and I've talked about it and my friends are just like, that's messed up or like whatever. They just like validate it.
And not like, are you sure? You don't know that.
Exactly.
Because like you feel it.
You
like
know
I
it.
know
You
the
know
feeling.
it. You know
it.
And then also the other thing, that's my favorite thing, is just if we're watching or reading or listening to something and someone says something fatphobic, it can be a very lonely experience to be in a group and then everyone else is laughing at the joke in the theater or something like that. So I appreciate it when that happens and my friends just like look at me and they're just like, oh.
So you don't have to be the one to be like, that's bad that was said.
Yeah. If they're like, that was dumb or whatever. And you don't even have to say that much. Like I've just had them like look over or my friend will be next to me and she'll be like, oh. Or whatever.
And that's nice.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. That's all it takes.
Well, good. I think that's the meat of it for this week. We've solved how to be a thin ally. You're welcome. Today's episode is sponsored by 1 Second Every Day, a video diary app that helps you create, remember, and share your life story, 1 second at a time. Do you sometimes wish you could watch a movie of your life? With 1 Second Every Day, you finally can.
You can use the app to chronicle trips or special moments like a wedding, graduation, or watching To All the Boys I've Loved Before for the very first time. But my favorite thing is capturing the basics of life, getting ready for the day, grocery shopping, or rewatching To All the Boys I've Loved Before for the 7th time. From milestones to moments that might feel insignificant, future you will be so grateful that you saved them all.
You can opt into daily reminders so you never forget to record your 1 second. And if you keep it up for a year, you'll have a 6-minute long diary. That's a 6-minute long catalog of who you were with, what you did, what you ate, and who you were for a whole year of your life.
Thanks to 1 Second Every Day, we'll never have to struggle to remember what we were up to during the summer of 2018, the sweatiest summer of all time. Trust us, the best time to start your video diary is now.
You can find the app in the Google Play Store or the App Store by searching the number 1 and second every day. Record less and live more with 1 Second Every Day. And don't forget to check out our very own video diary of the summer on our Instagram after the episode.
And now it's time to Ask a Fatty. If you want advice, you can send a voice memo of yourself asking a question to FYI@she'sallfatpod.com. You can record it on your computer or the voice memo app on your iPhone. Just keep it short, about 1 minute max. Or if you're shy, you can send us a plain old email at FYI@she'sallfatpod.com and we might answer your question right here on the show. This week on Ask a Fatty, we have a very special letter from Hannah.
Hey ladies. I'm a new listener, but I think I'm supposed to say that this is Hannah, so it's Hannah. Long story short, I'm a thin person living in a smaller body, but I've had a whole experience with, an eating disorder and coming through recovery from that, body positivity, and specifically fat positivity has been a huge part of recovering from that. And now that I kind of live my life in this intuitive eating, body positivity, health at every size lens, I've realized how sad it makes me that one of my friends that lives in a larger body is not body positive and misses out on a lot of things because she is larger and doesn't have that self-confidence. So I guess my question is, as a person living in a smaller body, how can I help her be more body positive without being annoying? Let me know if you have any advice. Thank you guys so much for all the work that you do. Bye.
Thanks for that voice memo, Hannah, and thanks for listening. This is interesting because we also both have fat friends who are like not body positive, and I have definitely noticed some other like fat people kind of dropping away or like not interacting with my stuff once I started being more vocally fat positive. Some people just aren't ready yet. They're not there yet.
And I will say, growing up, when I had thin friends who were trying to encourage me, the worst thing they always did was, you're not fat, you're pretty.
Yeah.
So I think you know better, like from the sound of your letter, to not do that. But for others listening, like, please don't do that. But I think, yeah, don't try to, push them further than if they're ready, because truly it's such a personal journey that even if you are so well-meaning, there's no amount of convincing you can do to make your friend like break free from diet culture.
But I think what you can do is, because I think it's kind of inappropriate to like try to tell her like, no, you should just be confident, blah, 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 whatever. And
easy for you to say, honestly.
Yeah, and you know that too. But like what you can do is just be vocal about your own political views, because remember, body positivity is a political movement. It's not just about personal self-love or personal self-confidence. So for example, you can just be an active vocal ally in a general way. Like you go to a movie theater and you're like, hey, are you comfortable in these seats, to her? And then in general, you could be like, hey, as a group, we should not go to this place because it's not accessible. And you don't have to say like, for so-and-so. You could just be like, it's not accessible, so we shouldn't go there. Or you can, do the things on Twitter and Instagram that we talked about earlier. You can say, I'm an ally to fat people and blah. You could say, like you watch a movie, you say, oh, there were no fat people in that movie. I wish there was better representation. You can retweet something and say like, fat people are beautiful, or whatever you want to say,
You make it clear that you are a safe place for her to go when she is ready to get there. That's the most important thing.
If your fat positivity shouldn't be to save your fat friend, you know what I mean? Yeah. It should be like a political viewpoint about how you think the world should treat fat bodies in general.
Exactly.
So like you can enact that in your own space without kind of putting it on her. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And if your fat friend is like me, I bet it will be way easier for her to say there should be more accessibility for other fat people than it will be for her to say, I deserve to fit in these spaces and I deserve to be more comfortable. So if you start vocally talking about those things, we're always talking about like bigger seats on airlines or accessibility literally anywhere, or more clothing options for fat bodies, and you make it public that that's how you think, she will see you as safe. And then when the time comes, she'll be able to talk to you.
I'm imagining you probably are uncomfortable in some of these conversations, not knowing what to do if she is kind of putting herself down in front of you, which a lot of people will do. Mm-hmm. So if she says like, oh, I'm fat and I need to lose weight or something, you can just not respond. You can just kind of smile.
Exactly.
And you can make it clear that you don't think she needs to lose weight without saying things that come off as patronizing.
Exactly.
You can be like, do you mean you want to exercise more? I'd be glad to take you to my exercise class. You could say, oh, do you mean you want to go shopping for some new clothes? Let's go shopping together. Like, because, again, nobody feels fat. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
Can try to get at what the actual feeling is without interacting with that kind of toxic, like, fat is bad, I'm fat and I'm bad, I feel fat and I'm bad kind of thing.
Because the lack of the confirmation might make a difference. You don't know for sure, but you do know that confirming those like horrible suspicions she has won't help. So the opposite might help, maybe. Mm-hmm. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
That's all we can think. I think that just, making it clear that you're there to support her and making it clear that you're not going to push her, and being there and being a witness, like we've talked about before, to things that happen to her if they do happen to her, are all good things, all good first steps.
Yeah.
Tell her to listen if she's on Fat Podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Now let's move on to It's Okay You Can Ask, a segment that Sophie has dreaded all summer long.
We'll find the answers to our burning questions like, I know what Afropunk is.
You DM'd me this morning, what is Afropunk?
No, I didn't.
Are you kidding me? Don't make me pull up the receipts.
I thought it was a person. I know what Afropunk is like as a genre.
Wait, it's not a genre.
Is Afropunk a person?
Afropunk is a music festival.
Oh, I thought it was like
what is Afropunk? ?
Because walked into Afropunk made it sound like an event. I thought Afropunk was like a music genre.
No, honey. Anyway,
we'll find the answers to our burning questions like, what is Afropunk?
What is Afropunk?
I can't believe you.
Or what is natural wine?
What is natural wine?
Do you not know?
No.
I saw a bunch of white people talking about it on Twitter, and I don't know what natural wine would be.
I don't know anything about wine.
Okay.
I'm not a wine mom. I hate those signs. 4 glasses of wine till I fall asleep or whatever.
In the morning, I need my Java, and at night, I need my wine.
No. I hate those.
That's my personality.
I'm not a wine mom. Okay, so April, here's my question.
Okay.
You have told me before about feeling the need, and then showing me tweets about this, feeling the need to support Black created media or businesses because they're created by Black people, even if they're bad. What is the level of badness where your support stops?
It's bad content-wise, not bad, like, harmful. Oh. Like, I would never support Bill Cosby. Sure. But I will watch insert show here that I don't fucking like.
But how bad? Like, what if it was, like how bad?
Let's see. I will withstand a dude, where's my car level of pain.
Wow.
For Black art. And that's my cross to bear.
Can you give me some examples of, like, I mean, I can't. Not like from now, but like when you were younger? Like, when did this start being a political thing you did?
To me, in college, I went to film school, when I realized how hard it is for any Black creative to get anything made, I'm like, I will always shout it out. I will always throw money at it as long as it's not harmful to my community. But in the back of my mind, like, some of the shit fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You know? So it's hard because I can't give any examples because I work in the television industry and I don't want to shade anybody, but, like, fucking some of this shit is horrible, and, like, some of it I'm really, like, suffering through and whatever.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I was thinking about it after you said that, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. It feels like similar but different to how, like a bad alternate version of it is when women will be like, women support women or whatever, but it's just like white women say that about whatever created by women.
Yeah,
but even if it's harmful.
Doesn't mean excusing the, like, bad behavior of other people. Just means like if you like suffered enough to get something on the air in a movie theater, like, I'll fucking pay for it. But, like, oh my God, like, some of this stuff sucks. And some of it's like indie stuff too. Like, sometimes I will, like, pay for someone's Indiegogo and be like, this is going to be horrible, but, like, I want to support.
Are there limits to that rule for you? I'm just curious about what that variety of activism means to you.
Well, I will say that, like, I definitely am more forgiving of Black women's worth than Black men's worth. Just saying, because some of y'all don't know how to fucking act, and you already know. But yeah, I'm trying to think other than the limits, other than it being, like, harmful. If there's a lot of it, like, you know, I can't watch 22 episodes of your bad show. Yeah. I could do a mini series. You know? That's kind of how I feel.
What other things does that, like, extend out to, that mindset? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, so recently...
Because it's not like I don't understand this idea. I just want to know how it is put into practice for you.
So it's put into practice with media I consume. It's also put into practice with... Recently, I moved to a Blacker neighborhood, and I've been making more of an effort to buy Black. And a lot of times that means, like, really inconvenient. Like, the other day, my sister and I were trying to find a Black-owned nail salon. And, like, one was, like, overbooked because everybody was trying to find a Black nail salon. One had horrible reviews, and I'm like, am I going to go and get a fucking ingrown toenail for this? And then one was just so overpriced. And we're just like, all right, what are we going to do? Am I really about to get a $60 manicure because I'm trying to buy Black? But, like, it's stuff like that where it's like I'm... like inconveniencing myself and making things, like, way harder in several different ways, and also probably spending more money and more time. But I want to pull up other Black small businesses because I know that it's hard. And so it extends there. I might give a Black artist a listen on Spotify that I don't want to. I might subscribe to a YouTuber that I don't necessarily, you know, might throw a like where I don't really, I might throw a half-hearted like, you know.
There's also, though, I think for me, a sense of, like, is this space not for me? Like, a lot of Black-owned businesses are also kind of talked about as community spaces. I don't want to support a Black, like, for example, I couldn't support a Black-owned hair salon. Yeah. I mean, they don't want me there.
I mean, you could, but
they don't want me there. And they can't do my hair.
But honestly, by the way, side note, this is not always true. There are several hair salons in LA where you'll go to their Instagram and they have, like, all these white girls who they did cornrows for. And I'm like, what are y'all doing? God. What are y'all doing? But no, definitely not. But it's on Instagram, it's easier where there might be, like, a Black person selling Black art on Etsy, and, like, you could easily order that. But sure. I think you're right that there are some spaces, it varies, but there are some spaces that it's just like, this is a Black apothecary shop. We're, like, selling rose hip oil, and, like, it's very Black in here. They're playing Sade. Like, I get it. But I just think wherever white people can, if you're interested in helping those business owners, it makes a big difference. I will link to an Instagram in the show notes called We Buy Black. They always highlight, like, cool Black-owned businesses or Black products. Like there's this Black-owned soap line that apparently is like really good, and you have to like special order it from this website apparently, but it's like better than Tide allegedly.
Really?
And so it's like if you want some next level soap,
Better than Tide.
better than Tide. As like a stay-at-home mom, I do know that Tide, unfortunately, is the best laundry soap. Because this is my life. But yeah, so I will link in the show notes if you are interested in dabbling in.
So yeah, we'll drop some shop Black or like lists of Black businesses to support. Well, thanks for chatting with me about it.
No worries. Shout out to the perils of capitalism.
Oh my God. And that's our show. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the stuff we mentioned today. And don't forget to send us your questions via email or voice recording to fyi@shesallfatpod.com.
Please make sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's super important in making sure people find the show. If you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, we'll give you a shout out on the pod next week.
She's All Fat is created, produced, and hosted by us, Sophie Carter-Kahn and April K. Quio. If you'd like to support the work we do, you can join our Patreon by visiting patreon.com/shesallfatpod. When you pledge to be a supporter, you'll get all sorts of goodies and extra content.
Our music was composed and produced by Carolyn Pennypacker Riggs. Our website was designed by Jesse Fish, and our logo is by Britt Scott. This episode was mixed and edited by the iconic Maria Wertel. Special thanks to our fairy intern mother, Lynn Barbara. Our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter handles are @ChesAllFatPod. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else you get your pods.
Bye!
Now let's move on. Let's move on.
Let's move on.
What? We're gonna be rusty in the beginning, Maria. Just strap in.